You're listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast with Matt Tomasi and can be found at borntokickarse.com/episode 40.
Welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast, where you're introduced to the most fascinating people on the planet. Learn the ingredients of greatness that you can apply to your life. And now your host, Matthew Tomasi.
Hello listeners. Podcasting is an awesome way for me to share my passion with the world and provide you with inspirational interviews. The only downside with podcasting is that it's one-way communication. My guest and I talking and you listening. Now is the time for me to start building a kick-ass tribe with people like you. People who listen to my podcast, people who hear where I'm coming from, people who want to improve themselves and want to kick ass in life. Let's start building a relationship. To get the ball rolling, I need you right now to head to my website, borntokickarse.com, and sign up for my free newsletter. Once again, that's borntokickarse.com. Once you've signed up, I'll be able to find out from you what you want to improve in your own life, whether it's creating your own website or launching a podcast, or you want to improve your health, or you want to set and achieve big goals, or whatever it may be. Sign up now. I'm looking forward to connecting with you. Christophe Barriere-Varju has raced the infamous Dakar Rally 4 times on motorbike, twice in Africa and twice in South America. The Dakar Rally is regarded as the toughest and most dangerous motor race on earth, covering 10,000 kilometres over 14 days across the harshest and most unforgiving terrain. Christophe is also the star of an award-winning documentary. Dream Racer is a feature-length film of Christophe's last outing, showing the legendary Dakar Rally in its purest form, with no sponsors, no multi-million-dollar team and no mechanic. Just one rider, a motorbike, a filmmaker and the world's most dangerous race. Enjoy the interview. Christophe Barriere-Varju, welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast.
Matt, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I've recently watched your documentary. It's called Dream Racer. Super inspiring documentary. Congratulations on that.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks. Yeah, it's definitely a story to be proud of, and one that will last for a long time, I think.
Yep. Well, we'll definitely talk about that more in depth. But your passion is motorbike riding.
That's right.
Particularly, is it sort of your specialty or your passion? Is it more off-road, trail as opposed to road?
It's it started with motocross. Definitely off-road, not so much on the road, but motocross and motocross racing.
Yep. Can you maybe tell us about that? How did you sort of get into that? Have you been riding all your life?
Oh, pretty much, yeah. I was 14 at the time, and I was in France during the holidays, and I grew up in the Ivory Coast in West Africa, and I was in the south of France, and just before I flew back to the Ivory Coast, my dad called me and said, "Look, before you come home, just make sure you go to a motorcycle shop and buy yourself a helmet." And it didn't take me very long to connect the dots, saying, if you want me to buy a helmet, does that mean that I've got a motorcycle? And I say, yes, I got you a small 50cc Honda motorcycle waiting for you at home. So obviously 14 years old, you're over the moon. You're so excited. You get to experience freedom and riding a motorbike. And it was a small dirt bike. And he bought himself a Honda 125 cc motorcycle as well, and we used to go on the weekend riding around the bush together. That lasted about 2 months. Yeah.
So you grew up in France? Oh, you're born in France?
I was born in France, and when I was 8.5, it's a funny story. My dad got tired of French people. He said they complain too much. They're never happy I'm out of here. And he sold everything that we had in the apartment and flew on his own to West Africa looking for a job. And he went to Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, and then finally found a job in the Ivory Coast. And 3 months later, my mom and my sister and I arrived in Africa, and I was 8.5 at the time.
Yeah. Do they speak French in the Ivory Coast?
Yes, it used to be a French colony, so everyone speaks French. Yeah, a bit of a different accent, but everyone speaks French, yes.
Now, throughout your teenage years, and this is documented in, I think it was in the Dream Racer documentary, or you've got another documentary called Riding Morocco, Chasing the Dakar. It was in one of those two that there was some footage of you as a youngster racing. Yeah, in
Dream Racer, Dream Racer racing motocross there in the Ivory Coast.
What sort of appealed to you with, the off-road racing?
Well, when my dad and I used to go into the bush just riding a motorcycle, we came across someone that had a proper motocross racing bike, and he was selling it. And my bike was obviously a tiny little motorcycle compared to that. And then he said, "Oh, you want to try it?" And I tried the bike, and it was like, "Whoa, this is so powerful and so scary." And anyway, the week later, I had the bike, and my dad bought the bike straight away, and this is how I started. And the thing with my dad is that he used to be an engine preparator for the what's the equivalent now, the Formula 3000 in France. So he had been in the competitive environment for a long time as an engine tune-up. And obviously, perhaps for him, it was more of a chance to go back to that feeling, and for me to experience something brand new. And the spirit of trying to perfect yourself into whatever you do, from trajectories to jump to riding position to suspension tuning to engine tuning and all that, is what started everything right at the beginning. Trying to find a better way to do something. So it was really trying to get better at everything that you do every single time that you try and do it.
Yeah. And you were quite successful in those early years riding?
Yeah, well, I had a pretty steep learning curve, and obviously my life was dedicated to motocross, and my parents' life was dedicated to motocross as well. So we spent a lot of time on the tracks, and I've learned very, very, very fast, and became pretty successful very quickly. Yeah. Won a bunch of races and race across West Africa as well, and before moving to the United States.
Yeah. I guess outside of the actual racing part of your career, when you were younger, like on the weekends, did you ever, like I don't really know the geography of, the Ivory Coast and that part of the world, but did you ever just head off into the bush much, just exploring?
Not too much. No, it was at the beginning, yes, with my dad when we had the two off-road bikes, and we used to go around and ride along the bush, along the coconut trees, and those sort of things. But as soon as I had the motorbike, it was full on. It was motocross track every single weekend, Saturday and Sunday, the whole day, and that was just that. And because I was pretty skinny at the time, and I had a trainer as well, which that you will be able to see him in the film Dream Racer, that took care of me right at the beginning and trained me specifically for motocross.
Yeah. What sort of differences in terms of the training is required for motocross versus like road racing? Is there much difference in terms of the training?
Yes, it's very different. Motocross is very intense cardio. Vascular, exercise, and the recovery time needs to be very quick in between efforts. So if you come around the corner and there's like a series of big jumps and everything, obviously, you use a lot of energy from every time you land. Your heart rate goes straight up, and the recovery time, you want your heartbeat to go, fairly quickly down straight away. The muscle groups that you are using in motocross is also very different from road racing. Obviously, most of it is around the legs, the abs, and the backs. Those are the three main areas that you really need to be strong with, as opposed to being, strong around the arms for different type of sports. So he came around the track, looked at the way it was, and put a series of plans together, just focusing on that. Yeah.
And how old were you when you moved to America?
I was 21. I had finished high school, and I stayed a year in the Ivory Coast, and didn't do too much then at the time. And then there was an opportunity for me to go to the United States, and I didn't speak English pretty much nothing at the time, so apart from what you learn in high school. And there I was 21, going from Africa, completely assisted, to being completely on my own into a whole different continent, not speaking the local language with 2 suitcases. So it was a big of a wake-up call, yeah.
Yeah, that would have been good. Whereabouts in America did you go?
In San Diego, Southern California. So it could have been a worse place, but I was lucky it was California. Yes.
And during your time in America, how long were you there for, and were you continuing to ride frequently?
Moving to the US for me was really to race motocross, and so my 2 suitcases were filled with motorcycle gears more than any other type of clothes. And I was racing there, and the only way I could stay in the US was to be on a student visa, so I had to learn something. So I figured, well, might as well learn English. That will help me along the way. Yeah. And started with that, and then that went pretty quick. And the only way again to stay in the US was to be a student. So I enrolled into a bachelor of business, and then the 4 years went by, and I was racing motocross at the same time. And after breaking a lot of bones, you spend a lot of time on the mend, and then you start thinking, well, maybe I should have myself a career just in case something goes wrong there and you don't make it in motocross. And ended up studying being a Bachelor of Business Administration, and I got a triple major MBA after that. So I spent about 6 years in San Diego. And then worked there for a little bit and moved to Phoenix, Arizona for work, and then a couple of years in New York before I came to Australia in late 1999.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned breaking bones. How many bones have you broken?
Oh, I don't recall how many bones, but the main ones were, obviously you break your wrist, your collarbone, and those sort of things, and dislocated shoulders. That's pretty common. But I broke my back the first time in 1993. And it was interesting because I was a student. I didn't have much money at the time, and I really didn't know that my back was broken. I felt something weird at the back, and kept going to uni with my motorbike. And then a week later, a friend of mine, his girlfriend was a nurse in a hospital, and snuck me in the back of the hospital, get some free X-rays. And she said, well, you better go see a doctor because it's not looking too good. And went to see the doctor, and he straight away said, stop moving. So that was a bit of a shock, and but you break your back, and I was so angry. Not so much angry, but when you break something, you don't want to admit that you're going to be stopped. So 12 weeks later, I was racing down in Mexico, and I won the race. And it was trying to get over something that tried to stop me more than anything. It's probably what triggered racing with injuries and trying to come back quicker. It was a scary moment at the beginning of the race, but something at the end you say, yes, you tried to stop me, but I got you.
Yeah, that would have been tough, with the injuries and particularly broken bones and your broken back, having to deal with the pain and possibly popping a whole heap of painkillers and, just trying to push through the pain.
Yeah, it's not so much the pain. I mean, the pain, you can kind of manage the pain, and everyone's got different tolerance to pain. I think the hardest part is getting over that psychological thing that comes into you, saying, "Whoa, I could have been in a wheelchair straight away," and trying to me that's the hardest part to get over with and to control and to put in a drawer forever. And that's the bit, when someone gets hurt, when they try something and they fall off or they don't succeed, that's it. It's over. I'll never try again. And you have to straight away, you have to get, on top of that. Otherwise, it will consume your whole life and you will be frozen trying to do anything else. To me, that's the hardest part. The pain, is temporary, and you get pain and you deal with it, and then the pain slowly disappears. But the mental side of things, I think, is the hardest thing to get over with.
So you mentioned, was it uni? You went through uni and you did an MBA.
Yeah, so at the end of the bachelor, I still wanted to stay in the US. Obviously, I was getting more and more interested in businesses, and talked to the advisor and said, "What else can I do?" And she said, "Oh, you can apply for an MBA." So I continue with the MBA. Obviously, with the bachelor, you learn a lot of theory, but not too much into practice. And I just wanted to get into more details. And that was the best thing I did. And so I got my triple major MBA in finance, supply chain management, and entrepreneurship. Yeah.
There's a famous race, the Dakar Rally. When did this, everyone's heard of the Dakar Rally, and we've all seen footage and some documentaries and stuff. When did the dream of, because you've completed the Dakar 4 times, twice in Africa and twice in South America. Yeah, but what's interesting about the Dakar Rally is that, and very few people know this, is that the actual concept of the race started in the Ivory Coast in 1976 by the fellow's name by the name of Jean-Claude Bertrand. And Jean-Claude used to race with his friends, going from plantation to plantation. And that led to a race called the Bandama Rally, which was a car race in West Africa, and it was part of the World Championship with the WRC. And Jean-Claude was one of those kind of individual that wanted to do a race where no one could finish. It made the race so difficult. One of the year there was absolutely no one at the finish line, and the following year I think only 3 cars finished. And in late 76, early 77, he wanted to go further than that. And he said, "I'm going to start a race that starts from Abidjan, the capital of the Ivory Coast at the time, and that finishes in the south of France. And I'm going to call this the Abidjan-Nice." So Nice, the south of France, and Abidjan, the Ivory Coast, and or the Côte to Côte, Côte d'Ivoire to Côte d'Azur. And it's going to be a 10,000-kilometer race, 6.5 or 6,200 miles long. And the only way you're going to navigate is a compass. There's going to be no road, and you can only make it if you help one another. So that was the original concept of the race. He did this race for about 2 or 3 years. And then in one of the year, I think 1977, a fellow by the name of Thierry Sabine participated in the race, got lost into the race, and got lost in the dunes in the Sahara for about 3 or 4 days. And Jean-Claude obviously put the rescue on and finally found him, saved his life, and gave him a job as someone to help with the marketing, because his concept was to do one major race every continent. So five major races. And he was trying to do the race in South America and Central America, and Thierry Sabine saw that the race in Central South America was not going to happen, and started the Dakar Rally, which at the time was called the Paris-Dakar race, which started in December 78. So the first edition was January, late December. So he used to start around the Christmas time. So December 78 to into January, and started the race starting from Paris to Dakar, Senegal, the capital of Senegal. And so since 1979, the Paris-Dakar was in Africa up until 2008, when the race got cancelled and moved to South America. Being in the scene growing up, with the off-road riding and racing, when did you start to have dreams of actually wanting to attempt entering the Dakar Rally? Was it from an early age, or can you sort of remember a particular point where...
Yes, definitely not an early age. When I was 16 in the Ivory Coast, a friend of us came back from one of the edition in 1986, and came back with one of those big motorcycle, big Dakar motorbike. And I looked at the bike and said, "You guys are totally insane." And I was pretty good with motocross, but sitting on that bike, it was just something else. And so I was never really interested at the time. And the thing that triggered me wanting to participate in a race was fairly late. It was in 2004, very close to my birthday, and I had just started my consulting business, and I was looking for something else to challenge me. And I had put motocross on hold a little bit, and I just wanted to do something a bit more difficult. And I said, just like that, and said, why not the Dakar Rally? And then the next minute, I'm going to do the Dakar Rally. And once you commit yourself, you got to do it. And so that's very simply, that's what triggered everything, trying to get a bit more color into my life, where getting that competitive spirit, that excitement, and the preparation before the race, that was what triggering, the whole thing. Yeah.
In terms of getting into the Dakar, how much is the entry fee to get in?
Yeah, so that's the difficult part, and this is why the race is so difficult for people to participate in. As a motorcycle entrant, if you rely on a new motorcycle and you have a mechanic to help you with the maintenance of the bike, it's about $120,000. So about anywhere between $100,000 and $120,000. So obviously that puts a brake on most people wanting to enter the race. So that's the first hurdle to go over.
Is it US dollars?
US dollar will be about $100,000, 120,000 Australian. So so you look at it and it's like the price of a small house and or a nice little piece of land in the country, and it's just like it's a hard pill to swallow, to put all that money into something that you don't know if you're going to finish or not.
Well, I guess two questions. One is, how do you go about fundraising for the entry fee? And how much time do you sort of give yourself to raise the funds?
So the Dakar, you really, once you commit, probably like February or the year before, so you got about 10, 11 months to get ready with the fund and the preparation of the race. The challenge with raising funds is, if you are a top competitor that can finish in the top 5 or top 10, you might be able to get some financial support because your chances of being on television is quite high. And the Dakar is one of the biggest motorsport events in the world. It's televised across 190 countries. The viewers are about 300 million viewers during the race. So it's quite a large event. So if you are one of the top riders, then yes, you can get financial sponsorship support. In my case, you are, as a privateer, that's a very slippery slope, and it's very difficult to convince someone to give you, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, where they very well know that there's going to be no return whatsoever. And but that doesn't mean you don't try and you try to find ways to give back to the organization that supports you financially. But to me, that was very unsuccessful. Mm-hmm. And so in the end, you just end up working, and trying not to spend a dime on anything, and saving everything that you have for a few years to come up with the funds. Yeah.
So did you sort of do the main legwork yourself in regards to the fundraising, or do you have like a project manager or some sort of partner to sort of help with that stuff?
I tried different ways. I tried one of the year I did it all myself, and then that didn't succeed. And then I appointed someone to go and knock on doors and do all the professional presentations and all that on my behalf. That didn't succeed as well. The following year I did it again myself, and didn't succeed. And so in the end, you say, well, I'm going to spend a lot of time trying to raise funds, and might as well do the actual, working hard, save the money, and you don't rely on anyone. Otherwise, you just spread yourself so thin in trying to prepare yourself physically, trying to work and trying to find the funding that you end up doing nothing. So, that's the most difficult part of racing the Dakar is raising the funds.
Yeah, just getting to the start line, raising the funds, organising it. There'll be countless knockbacks. Just having to
That's it, yeah. So you have to remain positive all the time. You make so many phone calls, and can you help me with a pair of goggles? Can you help me on a pair of boots? Or no, the answer is no all the time. Yeah. And you almost become immune, and you know what people are going to say, and you keep trying and trying and trying and trying. And but in the end, if you really want to make it happen, I think the only person that can stop you is yourself, and you find a way, and you just work hard and make it happen yourself without support, without depending on anyone. And I think there's a lot of people that stop at any difficulty, that once they start getting in front of that financial struggle, they just give up. It's just too hard. And the Dakar in itself, the race in itself, it becomes almost the easiest part of everything. It's getting the fun, but also organizing everything. When you do everything on your own and you live, across the world, like in my case, Australia, and everything else is in Europe, you have to deal with the time zone differences and the logistic, the cost, the additional cost of shipping everything. It's just crazy.
How much is the shipping costs to get your bike over? That'd be heaps as well, wouldn't it?
So it really depends, because as part of the entry fees of the Dakar Rally, if you have a bike that is coming from Europe, it's included into the entry fee. Yeah. But if one of the year I had my bike from Australia that I shipped, and because it was not coming from Europe, the entry fees were exactly the same, but I had the shipping cost on top of it. So if you are organized well in advance, you can ship everything by sea, which is a little bit cheaper. So you're looking about, probably around $12,000 between the shipping costs and all the paperwork and the custom and all that to go and then come back. And if you're late, which was the case in Dream Race, I just couldn't ship my bike with air freight because it was just going to be too expensive and I didn't have the money. So the only way was to actually buy another bike in Europe and get it shipped as part of the entry fees for the race. Yeah.
Now, this the struggle of fundraising was really highlighted in the movie Dream Racer, which for listeners, I highly, highly recommend, and I will put a link to it in the show notes. This is the actual movie itself. Like maybe if we could fast forward to, you've completed the Dakar 4 times. If we could maybe fast forward to because each Dakar event is like a podcast interview in itself, but for the 4th one, which was the 4th time you did the Dakar, that was done in alignment with the making of this documentary. Can you tell us how you met the producer? Was Simon Lee? Can you tell us about how you met him?
Simon Lee, yes. I met Simon helping a friend move house, and a friend of mine from Sydney was moving house, and he said, "Christophe, can you come down and give us a hand to carry all the the heavy stuff?" And I came down, and Simon was there as well, helping him, and that's how we met. And I had been wanting to make a film for quite a few years, and the funding of the film in itself was just too much. I just couldn't afford it. And talking with Simon, told me that he was making advertising films. And I can tell you very fast how quickly my mind worked. And I say, advertising, that's 30 seconds. This guy can record something. I'm going to convince him to make a film. All you have to do is 90 minutes of 30 seconds ads, and I'll be happy with that. So that was the closest I could get from a filmmaker. And for Simon, it was his first film as well, but he had been wanting to make a film for quite a long time, but never came across the right opportunity. So for him, it was something new as well. So for me, it was my first film. For him, it was his first film as well. And like that, two newbie, and just went into making a film, having absolutely no idea what we were going to record. There was no script or anything. And I remember asking Simon, say, "What do you want me to record?" And he looked at me and said, "Just record everything. Just figure it out at the end." So that's how Dream Racer started.
So what was his reaction when you literally said to him the first time, I'm going to do the Dakar Rally, or I want to get to the Dakar Rally next year? What was he, and I want you to film it. What was his? Did he believe you, or what was he sort of?
Yeah, no, he just laughed at me and didn't think I was serious because I'm not the type of person that looked like the super fit type of individual. So when I told him what was the race about, he kind of politely, English as well, so he politely smiled and said, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea," And it took me a few months of convincing and badgering him and annoying him, and finally, getting into the core of him wanting to make a film as well. So it was not just my story; it was also his story as well, which is chasing a dream and making it happen. And it was it's as you saw in the film. It's he lost it a few times, and there's things that we recorded that obviously he couldn't put into the film because it was just too intense between us. But it took a lot of convincing.
One of the other things that I enjoyed with, I guess, the start of the film was, in addition to the the fundraising struggle, but the clock was ticking. You're every day sort of getting closer and closer to the entry fee cut off and the actual entry the start. But you didn't have a bike. You didn't even have a bike.
Well, that's right. I had reserved the bike from the KTM factory in Austria, and because they had not heard from me for a little while, because I was still chasing, whether or not I was going to find the money to do the race, they sold the bike to someone else. And right at the end, when I got ready, I gave them a call and they said, "Oh, sorry, but we sold the bike, a month ago." And I was like, "Oh no," because I don't have enough money to ship the bike that I have in Australia, air freight, and I had to find something else. And luckily, there was a second-hand bike that they still had at the KTM factory, and it was this very particular bike I was after. I just wanted to do one more time the Dakar Rally, but on a special bike, and there was one left that they had not destroyed, they had not crushed. It was like an old factory motorcycle that they still had, and they then organized everything, sent the bike to a mechanic in Austria, and they went through everything, fixed the engine and review everything, and put the bike just in time. The paint, I think, was still fresh when they put the bike in the boat.
Yeah. Can you just give us a run through of the actual specifics of the bike? I'm guessing the actual bike itself would need to be, is it modified, or is it a special type of bike that can handle riding for 10,000 kilometers over extreme terrain?
So any bike, you can use pretty much, or at the time you could use up to any bike up to 700 cc motorcycle engine size. The most people, for economic reason, they buy a normal bike and put a bigger tank and do a few fittings for the road book and the navigation equipment and add that to it. But this bike is specially designed for the Dakar Rally, which means the engine is a bit, contains a lot more oil, and it's especially designed for the race. So you're not just adding bigger tank. The tank is designed into the bike itself. So the fuel range on this particular bike for Dream Racer was about 34 liters of fuel, which was smaller than the previous Dakar in Africa, where the other bike was 48 liters of fuel. So you can do quite a few kilometers with that, and so the bike is specially designed for the Dakar, which all the electronics and all the navigation equipment, the road book and everything is incorporated in the design of the bike as opposed to just add on to an existing bike.
Do you have like a camelback, like a bladder of liquid, or how do you sort of maintain it?
So I've got the 4-liter camelback, which is included into the protective gears as a so you got a front chest plate. It's like a hard plastic to protect you from impact. The same at the back, and the camelback is actually incorporated inside the whole protective unit, and then you put your jacket on top. Yeah. So you carry about 3 to 4 liters of water every day that you try to refill any opportunity that you get. And on average, during the day, you drink, 5, 6 liters of water, sometimes 7. You spend about 10, 12, 14 hours on the bike every day for 2 weeks. And you do about 600 to 800 kilometers per day, 600 to 800 kilometers per day, which is about 400 to 650 or 700 miles a day. A bit less than that, sorry. It's 1.6. So yeah, about 400 to 500 miles per day for 2 weeks straight.
What about for food? Do you have where do you sort of have food on the bike or on you? Where do you sort of store that? What do you just?
Yeah, the food is so early in the morning when we wake up. Usually wake up about 3:30, 3:45, have breakfast, and by 5:30 we're already on the bike on the way. So we have a big breakfast before we go, and as part of the breakfast, they give us a paper bag that contains a lot of power bars and those sort of things, and we put as much as we can into our pockets. So we try to keep light food, so you don't have to carry something too heavy, and stuff that into the pockets, and you just nibble on that during the day up until the late afternoon before you have a big dinner. So you really don't have any you don't have time to stop and have lunch or anything like that. So it's just every opportunity that you get to to have a bit of food that you carry, that's what you do.
Now, can you take us to the start line? So, if you've managed to secure the funding and your bike is there, and Simon, the cameraman, is there as well with you. Who was the third guy? There was an Aussie. Was he a reporter?
Yes, Jacob. Yeah, Jacob Black, and Jacob gave me a call just a couple of weeks before the race, and out of the blue, and he said, "Look, my name is Jacob, and I'm going to do some reporting for SBS, and I don't know how I'm going to travel in South America." And I said, "Great, you and Simon are totally disorganized. I'm going to put you two together." So I put them in touch, and this is that, which was definitely not part of the story originally. Simon and Jacob traveled together in probably the smallest car ever in the Dakar Rally, and that was a story in itself. And the two had very, very, very interesting relationships throughout the movie as well.
Oh, that guy, Jacob, he was so funny. The way he comes across, he's just like a natural comedian. And there was one part in the actual movie where, I was literally laughing out loud. There was footage where, I think this was sort of maybe towards the end of the Dakar, where there was footage of this massive sand dune, and you see this guy on a motorbike coming down, and it's a gigantic sand dune, and then there was a car that absolutely flew down past him, past the guy on the motorbike, and then there was this truck that came down and was going at triple the speed of the car. And as the truck came down, what Jacob sort of called out, I won't give it away, but that was so hilarious. I highly recommend people to...
Yeah, the line that he says is just cracks up everyone, and it's just out of the blue like this, and he goes, that's a fantastic line, yeah.
But can you maybe talk about the actual start line? So with the Dakar, there's the three categories. There's motorbike, car, and truck. What's it like?
And actually, four categories. Yeah, you've got the motorbike, you've got the quad bikes, which is a motorcycle with 4 wheels. You've got the cars and you've got the trucks. So each one is a category in itself. Within the cars, you have subcategories as well, depending on the type of production car, or prototype, or size of the engine, and so on and so forth, and 4-wheel drive and 2-wheel drive. But on overall, you've got about about 500 or so competitors participating in the race. So it's quite a big number of people to move day in and day out, and all the logistic that goes with it as well.
At the start, is it like go and everyone goes at the same time, or do they have like a staggered start? What's that like, and what's the atmosphere like at the start of the Dakar Rally? G'day guys, Matt here. This podcast is a labour of love, and all episodes are researched, scheduled, edited, created and promoted in my spare time. Typically, after an episode has been recorded, it can take another 3 hours of post-production activities to get the final cut. If I'm providing you with value and you wish to support my vision of sharing these inspirational stories to the world, you can do so at borntokickarse.com and click on the Patreon banner. Your support will help to maintain the monthly podcast running costs and enable me to outsource repetitive tasks so I can bring you even more kick-ass episodes. Once again, if you want to support me in producing this podcast, head over to borntokickarse.com and click on the Patreon banner. You can't miss it. And now back to the rest of the show. At the start, is it like go and everyone goes at the same time, or do they have like a staggered start? What's that like, and what's the atmosphere like at the start of the Dakar Rally?
Well, that particular year, they started with in the order of the numbers of the vehicles. So the motorcycle go first, and then the cars, and then trucks. And then based on the first result, then the fastest person starts first, so on and so forth, and that goes on pretty much most of the race. The first day is always last minute preparation, and the nerves are up there, especially for people that have never raced a Dakar. You don't know what to expect, and it's almost like going into an area and that is fully enclosed, and they throw lions at you, and you don't know if they're going to eat you alive on the first day, or if they're just going to keep you there for a little while. So it's a bit scary.
Yeah. With the terrain, what's the terrain like? Can you describe some of the terrain on various checkpoints? What was some of the terrain that you went through?
Well, the terrain vary because you travel so much across each country that especially in South America, the difficulty comes from the heat because it's summertime there, and also the altitude. So you start, in the case of Trimoso, we started in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And first you go through the plains, it's pretty flat. And after a few days, you start going over the mountain range to cross into Chile. And when you go over the mountain range, then you go up in altitude. So you go from zero meter up to 4,000 meter altitude. And then, as you know, the difficulty that comes with the lack of oxygen and falling asleep and getting numb, and that's a challenge in itself. And then going straight back down again straight away. So the heat and the altitude is the most difficult, which is very different from what when the Dakar was in Africa. The difficulty in Africa was very different. In Africa, you started from Europe and going into the African continent. And the difficulty there was the night came in very quickly. And also the fact that if you got lost in the middle of in the desert, there's absolutely nothing around you for 600, 700, 800 kilometers. You're nothing. You're just a little dot. And if you get seriously injured, the closest good hospital is back in Europe. So it's a different challenge. South America, obviously the people are very enthusiastic about races. So that's a nice part, but it's also fairly dangerous because there's so much people on the road and greeting you and everything. But it's a challenge in itself. Yeah.
The actual altitude would be pretty full on to deal with. Did you get sort of massive headaches at all? Or?
Not at all. For me, I just get a little bit of numbness into my fingers, and I try to control my breathing as much as I can to lower my heart rate, and drink lots and lots and lots of water to try to bring some oxygen somehow into my body.
How taxing is it on the body? If you're going over, off-road terrain, not on roads, just literally off-road. How taxing is it on the body for, how long did you say an average sort of day lasts on the bike?
10 to 14 hours, 10 to 12 hours on average, 14 if things go wrong a bit. So it's a long time to be sitting and moving. So the effort, obviously, when you're on the road section, that's the easy part. But it's not so easy because you're still sitting and your bum hurts a lot. But off-road is the equivalent of about 3 marathons a day for 15 days. So physically, your heart rate goes anywhere between 140 to 180, 200, 100, 180, 190. Depending on the type of terrain. So if you go into the sand dunes, you fall down a couple of times and straight away your heart rate goes up, and then you go down, you continue, it goes back down to 140, 160, and then you struggle a bit, and so your heart rate is always, you try to not go into the anaerobic mode too often. So you try to stay within the 140 or below mark as much as you can. Yeah. So you can keep competing and not draining your energy day in and day out, because after 6, 7, 8 days you won't be able to last. On top of that, you have to deal with injuries. Every time you fall off, you have a tendency to tweak something, ligaments or muscle or something, and you try to minimize those as much as you can. If
you get into trouble somewhere, as part of the entry, is there mandatory safety gear in terms of like some sort of EPIRB or some sort of device that you can activate so that authorities can pinpoint your position? Yeah. There is, as part of the GPS unit, we have the whole tracking system, so you can actually communicate with the PC course, the bivouac, or the HQ in Paris. You can talk with them. The challenge that if you press that button, chances are you're going to be excluded from the race. So that's something. But yeah, from safety, they will know if they follow you non-stop. They will know if the bike came to a sudden stop. They will even know if the bike is laying horizontally as well. Yeah. So that's pretty good. Yeah. Can you talk about some of the sand dunes? How big are the sand dunes? And secondly, how soft are the sand dunes? Are they? They're all different, depending on the areas that you go in Argentina, for example, you have the gray dunes. The sand is very hard, so it's not soft, but it's very, very slippery. It's almost going down a ski slope, going down the snow. And that's a bit tricky because it gets so steep, especially on the downhill, that it's very slippery. And then you go to another section where the sand obviously is pretty soft, and the temperature gets so high during the day that if you go early in the morning into the sand dune, you're kind of okay, because it's fairly hard from the humidity and the moisture in the sand. But if you get into that section around 2 p.m. in the afternoon, the sun is starting to dry all those dunes, and with the previous vehicle, it gets very, very soft as well. So they vary greatly. Some of the dunes are usually pretty tall, but the track is mostly done for cars and trucks as well. So which means a motorcycle can go up and down much more easily than a car or truck can. So it's easier to attack the dunes on a motorbike than another vehicle. Yep. How much of a risk was it where motorbike riders could get hit by a car or truck? Is that a big risk? It is a big risk because, especially for the slower rider, if you start mid-pack, 3-4 hours later, you end up having, the first few cars and the first few trucks on your tail. And that's
that's the most dangerous part of racing the Dakar. And in the sand dunes, very often you fall on the back of the dune. So you go across the dune, the next thing you know, the other side, you didn't know what was there, and you lose your balance and you fall off. And even though the dunes are a big area, most people have a tendency to go, through the sand section that the road book tells you have to go through. And if you fall off behind the dune and the car was right behind you, a couple of 100 meters, comes right behind you and had no idea you were there in the first place. That's the dangerous part. So you have an emergency button that you push on a motorbike if you can get access to it very quickly. That will alert you that some danger is in front of you. So it emits a different sound. So you hear beep, 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 and you know that something is wrong in front of someone. So then the car is meant to slow down and be extra careful. But sometimes you don't have the opportunity to press that button fast enough. And there's some old footage where you see, a car going over a crest of the sand dunes, and there's a rider trying to lift the bike, and the car comes from behind and jumps straight into it. So it's kind of it's kind of weird to be in the wide open desert and still manage to hit each other, but it happens. Yeah.
Well, it's no joke, the Dakar Rally. There's, I don't know how many deaths. Do you know how many deaths there have been?
Yeah, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's been a lot of deaths, both competitors and spectators as well.
Yeah. What about animals? Was that ever a risk as well, running into like a cow or some sort of animal?
Yeah, cows and deers and those horses, wild horses as well in South America. In Africa, it was cows and monkeys and and donkeys as well, which have sometimes they lay down on the dirt, and because they are the same color as the dirt, you don't even see them until the last minute where they get up through the dust. Yeah. Quite scary, but animal is also a challenge.
Just with riding at night, is that a lot more difficult in terms of your approach to riding at night?
It's something you definitely want to avoid. So if you are, especially in the sand dunes, nighttime becomes a nightmare, and that's something that you want to avoid at all costs, because your headlight obviously lights everything up in front of you, and in the sand dunes, all you will see is a big wall. You go up that wall, you don't know how tall that wall is, and you don't know what's on the other side, and it's very difficult to maintain your balance and navigate at night in the sand dunes. Other type of terrain it's a lot easier, but the sand is something you definitely want to not be in there in the middle of the night.
Just going back to the getting your bike sort of bogged in the sand, how do you get it out? Like if you've entered your bike is bogged and it's at least half of the wheels are under the sand, front and back wheel. How do you get out of that? Like, do you have like a shovel or anything on you, or how do you?
No shovel at all. I mean, first one is you dig out with your hands, but you use a lot of energy doing that. So there's a couple of techniques if you're still in a good level of energy. You lean the bike sideways completely on both sides. By leaning the bike flat into the sand, that brings the sand that was on the side of the tires underneath, and then you lift the bike up, and you do that a few times, and the bike gets toward the top of the sand. The trick is obviously when you get bogged is to not insist too much and get totally bogged. So you want to avoid, being too stubborn. And there's another technique as well where you lean the bike sideways and you do a 180 degree turn, very, very quick, very sharp, very short, to get the bike out of the thing. So by leaning the bike and giving it good gas, you get the traction from the side wall of the sand, and then you get the bike out that way. But keep in mind that those bikes are about 212 kilos, which is 160 pounds of, it's a pretty heavy bike. So you do that only a few times before you get totally exhausted. It doesn't matter how fit you are, it just gets you. Yeah.
Can you count how many times you actually came off the bike?
Too many. too many. And in the case of Dream Racer, it's because I had some injuries that were lingering. I was counterbalancing everything, and I was losing my balance. And then I had even more injuries, which made me, even more prone to falling off into the sand because, the sand is a bit tricky. It could be easy to ride, or it could be a nightmare if you start struggling. And so every time you fall off, I mean, it's not a big fall. And the good thing with the sand is that you don't hurt yourself too much because it's fairly soft. But every time you have to lift the bike, and sometimes you just can't. And all you have to do is lift the motorcycle, and you just can't because your energy is totally depleted. You have no more muscles, you have no more energy, and you start wondering, what the hell am I doing here?
So when you come off the bike, do you actually literally fly over the handlebars? Like if you hit a rock, for example?
Oh yeah, that could be the case, but most of the time the falls are over the crest of a dune, where you lose your balance. The other times is when you hit a soft pocket of sand that you had not seen. Then the bike sinks in front of you. The front wheel just get buried into the sand, and then you fly over the bars. Yeah.
Can you talk about your fuel strategy in terms of the actual fuel for the bike? If on the next day it's going to be X number of kilometres or hours travel, assuming you don't get lost, and we can maybe talk about getting lost. But do you basically just fill the tank literally to the brim before you start?
It depends. It depends the length of the stage, although that could be very misleading as well. Because sometimes a short stage is actually very, very difficult, and you spend the whole day, doing a short stage as opposed to a longer stage where you can maintain the speed high. But I think you always want to have enough fuel to last the stage, plus, some a bit of a buffer in case you get lost or in case you run into difficulties or something. So you just don't want to finish the stage and be totally drained. So you want to carry the fuel that you have, enough fuel to last you the distance, plus have a security buffer as well in there. Yeah. So that's the trick, yeah. But the stages you have a refueling point every 600 kilometers. I think it's about 400 miles. So you have even if the stage is longer than that, you in the middle of the stage you pull off, and there is a section where you go in and you've got 15 minutes to refuel and clean yourself up and eat something, and then keep going again. So.
What about if you run out of fuel somewhere in between? Like on a stage somewhere, if you radio in for help, you need fuel, can the organisers come and deliver fuel?
No, that will mean you're out of the race. So that's if you run out of fuel, then you find a way with the locals or with other competitors, most likely, to give you a bit of fuel. So it could happen that you have a small hole in your tank, or you fell off and you lost quite a bit of fuel early on, and you just ran out. And so on my bike I carry a small hose as well. So if I get into a fuel issue, that I can siphon another bike into my bike quite easily.
Do the old hose down the the fuel pipe and start sucking it out.
Yeah, try not to swallow too much fuel. It doesn't taste that good, but that's what you do. And I've helped quite a few competitors that way as well, where you have another 100 kilometers to go and they just run out of fuel. And so you check your fuel, you think you have enough to last you the distance, so you give them, a couple, half a gallon or something to help them finish the day. So. Yeah.
Did you carry cash on you at all in case of those situations where
always,
you had to bribe, or not
always,
necessarily
always,
bribe,
yeah.
but like if you need assistance, you just here's $100, to a local. I need this. I need fuel. I need food.
Yeah, you always carry cash on you, and to get you out of trouble if you run into some issues. It could be that the bike breaks down and you need to catch a ride somewhere, and you need to pay someone to take you somewhere. You always have cash on you. Yeah.
Did you ever get lost at all?
I did, yeah, and it was a bit in Dreamer. So unfortunately, we're not able to capture that footage because the memory card was already full for quite a while. But I did. My GPS was not working, so I had no way to navigate, and I was just following tracks, trying to finish the day, and I was probably not far away, maybe 100 miles away from the finish line for that particular day. And I followed some track, and I saw the track going one way, so I figured, that's where everyone is going, and ended up into this massive mountain range of gigantic dunes. And I got so deep into it that the sun started going down, and it was a bit windy, so the tracks were disappearing as well. So I couldn't really turn back because I didn't know where I came from because I didn't have any navigation equipment. And as I went in there, I realized that this was not the track because it was just too hard for the cars, too hard for the trucks, and even too hard for 90% of the competitors to be able to climb up and down those dunes. And the only way for me to go through and find the finish line was to try to climb the highest possible point of this section, so I could see from a distance. And I knew I was getting close to the ocean side in Chile. And so I climbed that mountain range very, very, very high. And so from a distance, the cars that were like so far away, small amount of dust. And I say, okay, straight line back all the way back down on the other side. And then I realized that the tracks I was following was the tracks from a motorcycle race that was held there the weekend before. And it was just the local people doing the local racing, and I was following the wrong track, and I nearly ran out of fuel. That would have been the end of Dream Racer because no one would have been able to find me out there because my navigation equipment was not working, and it's just a very, very, very lucky day.
Yeah. Can you describe what do the actual checkpoints look like? At the end of the day, the end of the stage, you've made it to a checkpoint on a certain day. What's it like? Is it just like a massive moving city, or with
No, you got teams. Yeah, you got teams of people with a couple of cars down. So the first checkpoint obviously is in the bivouac when you leave, so they know that you've left. And then you get to the start of the stage. So you got the liaison, which is the road section of the connection between the bivouac and the actual racing stage. And then you have the racing stage, and then you have another liaison that gets you from the end of the racing stage back to the next bivouac. So once you leave in the morning, you got obviously the first point is at the bivouac. The second point is at the beginning of the stage, and the special stage. And then within the special stage, you've got different checkpoints as well, where you go in, handing your car, they stamp the time when you arrive, and then you keep on going. And so you have those throughout the day, and at the end of the special stage, you obviously have another stamping point, and then you do the liaison, which is back to the bivouac on the road section. And once you arrive in the bivouac, they check you in as well to make sure that you have arrived, and check your GPS and your tracking and everything for penalties in case you missed a waypoint, and all those sort of things. And that goes on every day for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Is there any mandatory gear checks, like, in the middle of a particular stage where you have to stop and they sort of do a check on, the mandatory safety gear? Do they ever do that?
No, not during the stage. No, they check it before, but not during.
What about at the end of the day, when you've made it to the checkpoint, maintenance on your bike? Can you talk us through that? Did you have a mechanic, or how did you maintain getting the bike back in order, ready for the next day?
So in Dream Racer, I chose to do the race without any mechanical support. So I did all the maintenance myself every day. So you spend 12, 14 hours a day on the bike, plus another 4 or 5 hours working on the bike each day. And so obviously the important parts of maintaining a bike is obviously all the filters, air filters and oil filters, changing the oil, making sure that you don't have any loose bearings in the wheel, all the spokes are all nice and tight, no electrical issues. and you do that every day, and you try to rotate the maintenance by, depending on the type of stage. One day you do the front, the next day you do the oil and, the oil filter and those sort of things. The next day you do the back, the chain and those sort of things. And you try to manage that maintenance on the bike depending on the terrain that you're going through as well. So if one day you spend a lot of time in the rocks, obviously, when you arrive at the bivouac, you're going to spend quite a bit of time checking, making sure that there was no damage on the rims, on the tires, on the bike itself, because it's pretty hard on the motorbike. And so you try to maintain your bike according to the type of stage that is you're going through. So if one stage is pretty easy, but you know that the next day is going to be very difficult, but it's a marathon stage, which means you don't have access to the bike, or you cannot do much, or you're going to arrive very late that day, you ride a little bit more conservatively, trying to help the bike and to last the second day.
Yeah. Was there ever a possibility for you to hire a mechanic there? Does the organisers sort of, like, if your bike needs some sort of major repair, is that it for you, or do they have the option where you can get?
No, you cannot hire a mechanic. I mean, you can ask for help from other teams if they are free and if you've got a good friend with someone. But normally, if you have a mechanic to start with, you end up with a mechanic. But if you don't have someone to help you at the beginning, that's what you do. You might get some help from someone to help you carry tires and wheels and those sort of things. But even the entry fee for the mechanics is very expensive as well. So people that have paid for those mechanics, they don't want, to share the cost of that with someone else that has not paid for it, which is not right, and. So no, you're stuck with what you got in, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's part of the appeal of it, I'd say. Like, when you're there, the issues with the bike and not having a mechanic is like a risk that you sort of go in with. But also at the end of the day, you've ridden for so long, many hours that day, and physically and mentally taxing, and then you've got the maintenance on the bike afterwards, later on that evening. How much sort of sleep were you getting on average per night?
You slept about 3.5 to 4.5 hours a night for 2 weeks straight. And obviously that's a challenge because you sleep deprived and then you get mentally exhausted and your focus level is not so sharp when you're exhausted like this. So obviously there are techniques where you can train yourself before the race, trying to fall asleep a lot faster to try to get into that deep sleep, which is not easy when you're into an environment where all night long you hear compressors and banging and people working on cars and trucks and everything. But you get so exhausted that even with that level of noise, you still fall asleep. And it's actually a good sleep because you're so physically tired that, it's a very deep sleep very quick. But the problem is that if you end up having issues and you end up not sleeping at all, then obviously it catches up with you the following day. And then if you run into some other issues, and you only can sleep an hour or two, then the third day becomes very, very challenging. And you try to avoid getting into that downward spiral of being totally sleep deprived because you cannot function. So the time is the issue, and every opportunity that you can get to save time to get more sleep, that's what you need to do. And the chit chat with the friends is totally useless. Either you do something to help you with the bike, with your race, and 10 minutes of chatting to someone to say how nice the weather was today is 10 minutes of sleep you could have got later on. So it's you try to maximize that time because the time never stops, and then it's a race against the time more than anything, the Dakar Rally, and you just want to every minute that you can save, that's what you do.
What about trying to get maximum calories back into your body in the evening? What do you do? Just eat as much as you can, just try and get it all down?
Well, it's hard to eat too much too, because your stomach is going through 12 hours effort all day long, and it becomes pretty small as well. So you try to eat at least maybe twice if you can. So as soon as you arrive into the bivouac about 5-6 o'clock, you try to have something to eat straight away, and then try to have another meal probably around 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock at night before you go to sleep. But yeah, obviously, you eat what they give you, so you got a kind of big canteen. So it's mostly, the local food, rice and pasta and those sort of things. But you try to bring the type of food that is going to help you, and eat as much as you can. And yeah.
What about?
It's a challenging thing.
What about with the actual? With each stage, is there a time cutoff? Like you have to be you have to make it by a certain time every sort of stage?
You have to be at the start of the following stage. I cannot remember exactly the time, but I think it's about half an hour, 45 minutes or 1 hour before the start of the car as a motorbike. So you can spend the whole night and the whole early morning riding straight through, as long as you arrive at the start of the following stage an hour before the first car is due to start. That's when you can start. So sometimes people get lost in the middle of the night. They know they're just going to run out of fuel because you cannot see anything, and so they slip at night into the sand dunes, wait for the early morning, and then keep on going in the morning and just make it just in time to start the following day. So quite a few people that do that, and and that's the challenge when you don't ride very fast. You have tendency to end up into that situation. And a race like the Dakar is just a race of attrition, and it becomes very, very difficult because obviously you ride slower, which means you spend more time physically and being physically active on a motorbike, which means you get tired even more than someone else. And that's difficult. In
the movie The Dream Racer, you sustained some pretty full-on injuries. What were the main injuries that you encountered?
Yeah, the first one was I had on day number, I think right at the beginning, on day number 6, I hurt my back, and I didn't know what it was at the beginning, but I hit a pretty big hole, and what I did manage to injure was the sacroiliac joint, which is the big ligament, the big joint that connects the hip to the spinal cord. And so my entire left side felt like someone throwing a needle right into it. And I thought I had compressed the disc or something, but it was actually the big joint, the big ligament that connects the spinal cord to the hip. So which meant that for the following 9 days of the race, I had to put all my weight on my right leg, trying to alleviate the pain on my left side of the body, which created other issues in terms of, balancing the bike and trying to, minimize the injuries every time the bike hit a bump, because it went straight into my spine. And also because you're using part of your body that is not so well balanced anymore, because you put all the weight on one side of the peg, on one side of the leg, that you lose your balance and you have a tendency to fall more often. And then 4 days before the end of the race, I hit a rock, and the handlebar went sideways so hard, and I didn't want to fall. I hang on to the handlebar so hard that I tore my left tricep, which meant for the last 4 days I had no back and I had no left triceps to hold the bike, and we had to go into the sand dunes, and you'll see in the movie the last half an hour, it's pretty intense, and it's trying to finish something that you started and you just don't want to give up, and your body is just falling apart slowly. And it's a situation that, it makes you discover who you are as a person if you just give up or you ignore the pain and keep going forward.
Where do you think that strength came from? Having to wrestle with that dilemma of, you're badly injured and not making it is a real possibility, and continuing to find this extra strength from somewhere. Where do you think that sort of came from?
Well, the first part that I did was going back to the my motorcycle riding skills and trying to ride as effortless as I could, not to use any muscle in my body. So I was definitely concentrating all my energy on riding very, very well to try to minimize the injuries. And the second part was, giving up was never an option, and was trying to ignore the pain and turn that pain into a motivating factor. Every time something difficult came my way, whether it was painful, that triggered even more motivation from my part, saying, look, you're trying to stop me. I'm going to beat you, and I'm going to keep trying, and I'm going to keep going forward. Bring it on. And in a funny way, it's weird how your mind starts working, because the more difficulty you're faced with, the more stubborn you become, and you look forward to those challenges coming your way. It's kind of it's a weird thing, and the more difficult it gets, the more you're looking for those difficulties to keep coming those way, because it's almost like a game. You want to beat them every time, and it's obviously painful, and you know that you're going to suffer for a long time after that. It took me nearly 2 years to recover from my back injuries after the race, but I knew this was gonna, I was gonna be dealing with that later on. But, I thought if I keep moving, it's just time and it's just pain, and, I can still breathe, I can still walk, it could be a lot worse, but as long as I can keep moving forward, I will not stop. And it's really, really funny how your mind works when you're faced with those challenges. And sometimes it's difficult to, you try to simulate some of those things during training, but, the tagline of Trem Racer says it's at the age of who you are that you learn who you can be. And that is the perfect example of, you discover yourself in those situations.
Do you think, the mental toughness side of things for people, do you think that's something you're born with, or something that you learn?
Yeah, that's. I don't know if you're born with, or if you learn, or if you've trained yourself to become that way. I think when you sacrifice yourself so much trying to make the start of a race like the Dakar or any event, that you are not sponsored, that you don't have it easy, where you really push yourself trying to make every sacrifice to do something that you really want to do, then the idea of giving up is no longer an option. You don't want to give up. That's not even an option. As opposed to someone that has something coming its way a little bit easier, where they know that if they don't finish this race, the sponsor will pay for the next race. I think when you are, personally and emotionally involved into a race, that that you start a race and if you don't know if you're going to be making the race. And when I say making the race is, you could have an injury, you can have the bike breaking down, you could give up, or you could die. And every year people die during this race. So it's a real possibility. And you put yourself so much into this that, the concept of mental toughness becomes part of who you are as a person. And for me, it's just the tougher it gets, the tougher stubborn I've become. And it's crazy. You ignore everything else in your mind, and suddenly you're no longer tired. You just concentrate on what you do. You're breathing properly, you're drinking properly, you're eating properly, you're doing your navigation and you're riding, and there's not any other thoughts in your mind, because your mind takes a lot of energy level. I think the mind takes about 20% of your energy level. So if you can try to simplify, your thought process into a very robotic way, where you're no longer thinking about anything, it just comes naturally, then you save a lot of energy. And that mental toughness is, it's like a robot. A robot doesn't have thought. It just keeps on doing what it's meant to do. And that's how you become. And I think that's, I know it's a long-winded answer, but I don't know if you're born, if you learn, or if you train for it. It's just a combination of things that makes you become that way, I guess.
Can you maybe talk us through your emotions when you could see the finish line? You've you've endured all this suffering, and you've been on such an incredible adventure. Not just the Dakar itself, but leading up to all the trouble, all the trials and struggles that you went through, leading up to getting to the start line. What were you sort of feeling when you could see the finish line in the distance? Like on the horizon, it was 20 minutes away. What were you sort of going through at that point?
Well, the first thing you think is obviously, I hope nothing goes wrong with the bike and you don't have to push it for 20 kilometers. But, you become very nervous about any funny noise or anything that could happen or, especially at the last moment. But I mentioned before the hardest part is getting into the race. And probably the hardest part, the second hardest part is not actually the race, but it's actually after the race. And, the question that you just asked me, a lot of people ask you that at the end of when you cross the finish line, say, oh, are you happy? How are you feeling? And you really don't know what to answer because you don't have, yes, you're happy you finished, but you're not, in my case, and I know a lot of people are in the same way, you don't know what you're feeling because your feelings have been numbed because you've concentrated yourself so hard on doing what you have to do that those euphoric feelings are not even part of your thought process at the time, and you just, you're happy, but your emotions are. It's almost, I don't know how to best describe this. Is you finish watching a film and then you finish the film and everything is black and white, and the next day you're not racing and you don't know what to do with yourself. And you want to keep on going and you want to keep on going. So, the feeling of happiness is not there. It comes slowly. And I think it takes, roughly 2 to 3 weeks to realize what you've just done. But right at the end of the stage, it's obviously emotion coming through, but, all the feelings and emotions and things that most people feel when, they get, some happy news, something they're not there because you've become a robot and that robot needs to become human again. And that's a hard part, yeah.
Do you reckon you got another one in you, another Dakar?
Yes, I do. And so the next challenge is not, the Dakar on the motorbike. Dream Racer was the end of that. And I just wanted to finish the race and film and then show people, what it takes to chase your dream, and use me as an analogy to, chase their own dreams, whether it starts a business or climb a mountain or anything. The next Dakar that I'm preparing, and I'm not sure when it will be happening, hopefully next year, not this January, but the following January, is to race the Dakar Rally, not on a motorbike, but in a single-seater car with no co-pilot. Totally unassisted. So the same thing that I did with a motorbike, I will be doing that in a car, which is a lot more complicated to do the maintenance on the car than it is to do on a motorbike. So we are designing the car in such a way to make the maintenance a lot easier and less prone to break down and those sort of things. But so the Dream Racer 2 hopefully will be making the sequel of that. The next challenge is to race the Dakar without a co-pilot, totally unassisted in a car. And the car is being built at the moment in the US.
Yeah, that'd be good. Now, I've just got a couple questions as well before we sort of wrap up. Just on success, how do you define success in life?
To me, success is if you set yourself a goal, which could start with a dream and an objective of doing something, and then accomplished what you wanted to do. To me, that's a success. And obviously it starts with the dream, then you have the determination to go through, and obviously the resilience to keep going when things don't go your way. And, whatever that might be, it could be something very simple as making someone, a commitment to someone, to racing the Dakar, to deciding to swim across a lake, or, to do anything. You make a commitment to yourself, and the only person that can stop you is yourself. And being able to have a success with that initial thought is you going through with it and not using any excuse as a reason not to proceed.
If you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Christophe Barriere-Varju and give him some advice, what would you tell him?
Don't rush. Take your time, recover completely before attempting something else. And that was one of the mistakes when I was young is after injuries or something like this, trying to get back too quickly and not let your body heal totally. That's probably the biggest recommendation I'll give to a young Christophe.
Do you have any, or what advice would you give to a listener out there that is wanting to attempt the Dakar Rally? Is there like a main tip or some sort of advice you could give to someone who wants to do the Dakar?
Yeah, the first question, not so much of an advice, but the first question I will ask is motivation to do the Dakar Rally, knowing full well that he may not be in the plane back. So that's a big commitment. People die every year, and that's not it's not a race that you end up with just injuries or anything. It is very dangerous. So if you attempt to do the Dakar, it's not because you want to do the Dakar because your friends tell you, you should do the Dakar, or because you feel the fame of having that medal. It's more of your personal reason for doing the Dakar, knowing full well that it could be your next race and the last race. Once you're fine with that idea of, potentially, not coming back, then you really have to study the race very, very, very well. And what by I mean studying is learning everything about everything. It's not just a racing. It's not how to ride a motorbike. It's, how to train, how to sleep, how to breathe, how to drink, how to eat, how to navigate, how to maintain your bike, how to maintain your body, how to recover quickly. How to be faced with situation where there's no point in kicking the bike because something wrong happened. How to deal with maintaining your emotion and level to a point where you don't, you stay focused and, you're careful into everything that you do. And if you go through that training and simulation very well, it's the best training for life, for anything really. The Dakar is just a race, but that applies to everything that you do in life. And if you prepare yourself, there's no reason why you cannot succeed at anything that you want to achieve.
Now, whereabouts can people find you online? You're a host of a podcast as well. Whereabouts can people find you? And tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, so obviously the first part is the Dream Racer website, which is dreamracer.tv, and then from there you have access to the Facebook and Instagram and all that, where you can also order the DVD, the Blu-ray, or watch the movie Dream Racer on demand as well. So the movie is available worldwide, easy to get, and that's how you can engage on Facebook and all that. I'm also the co-host on the motorcycle podcast called Motorcycle Life Radio, and the website is motorcyclelife.com.au, and you can listen to our weekly podcast with Steve McDowell as well, and we talk about all range of things from road bikes to policies and safety, rider safeties, and all those sort of things. So it's a good podcast, and have quite a few laughs as well.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I'll put those links in the show notes. Just for listeners, I highly recommend either buying or renting the movie Dream Racer. It's won a whole heap of awards. It's won awards in LA, Barcelona, Milan, Marina del Rey, New York, Oregon, and it's been on a number of flights, Qantas, Virgin Emirates.
That's right, yes. And you know what? It's the only film in the entire history of the Dakar Rally since 1978 to have won any award. No other film that is Dakar related has won any award. Dream Racer is the only one. And people say, "Oh, it might be a motorcycle film," but as you know, it's not. It's a film about your own life, about your own desires, and it applies to young and older people, male and female. And we have viewers sending us emails saying, look, for the first time in 7 months, I had my 7-year-old daughter put down the iPad. A 7-year-old girl that was so into the film. She just forgot the iPad for the first time in 7 months. So that tells you a lot.
Well, I've got to admit, I loved it. The actual story itself had so many sort of ups and downs in terms of struggle and overcoming adversity. And right at the very end, I won't give it away, but I had sort of tears in my eyes, but in it sort of touched me in a real joyful way. Like I got so inspired from the journey and the actual documentary. It was really good. I'd definitely recommend it.
It's one of those films that sometimes you watch film and they entertain you, they make you laugh. But Dream Racer is one of those films that touches the human soul, and it just connects with the audience. And that connection is then, makes you think about your own life in a way, and some of the things that you have been wanting to do or you've done and failed or want to try again. And we even had viewers writing to us, say, look, after watching your film, I want to quit my job and go after what I've been wanting to do for most of my life. And I think that's a big compliment.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for coming on to the podcast, and congratulations again on Dream Racer. And yeah, we'll look forward to Dream Racer 2 coming out.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Cheers. Thanks a lot.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
You've just been listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast at borntoKickArse.com. If you liked what you heard and want more, please subscribe on iTunes. Give a 5-star rating and a Kick Arse review. This really helps to boost our presence and continues to allow us to introduce you to the most fascinating people on the planet. Welcome aboard, and catch you next time.